The National Environmental Policy Act created the EPA in 1970. And that does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The first ever Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for April 22nd, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The preliminaries are over. Donald Trump's criminal trial has started with a clash of opening statements, and even the first witness got in the box Monday. Just one of Trump's former allies turned witness against him. We'll have a report from inside the Manhattan courthouse, and our Ricky Kleeman, who has worked both as a prosecutor and defense attorney, will join us to analyze what was said and what it means. Ukraine got a lifeline this weekend with $61 billion in the foreign funding bill in the House, but for the last 2 years, tens of thousands of desperate Ukrainians have been given a lifeline in the United States, as Americans have sponsored their journey here as immigrants. Camila Montoya Galvez gives us an update on that program. And on this Earth Day, can you spare some love for the oceans? They give and they take. Oceans generate 50% of the oxygen on the planet and absorb 90% of excess heat created by global warming. They're called the lungs of the Earth. Ben Tracy tells us he'll go deeper. Plus, Leslie Stahl is here from 60 Minutes to explain why the current Commerce Secretary is in the thick of everything. Now, also on Monday, the Supreme Court heard arguments about how cities treat the homeless sleeping in public. We're also checking about drug shortages and romance scams. The numbers there are not small. All that and the most eerie photograph of the Titanic catastrophe. And the picture doesn't even include the ship. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, and thank you for joining us. A hush money cover-up conspiracy or just pieces of paper Donald Trump had nothing to do with. Those are the two choices lawyers put before the jurors in the New York City criminal trial of the former President Donald Trump. Opening statements were Monday in the first ever criminal prosecution of a former president. Trump, the likely Republican nominee for president, is accused of falsifying business records as part of an alleged scheme to cover up payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels right before the 2016 election, to silence her story of an alleged affair with Trump. The former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, was the first witness called to the stand. Prosecutors call him one member of a three-man plot who they are relying on to tell the story of this alleged conspiracy, sharing his conversations with Trump and Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, about burying stories that could have hurt Trump's reputation. Trump's campaign is taking a hit from his legal troubles, and it's not just because he is required to be stuck in court instead of on the trail. Federal Election Commission filings over the weekend show Trump's Save America super PAC spent roughly $3.7 million in legal fees in March alone. CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman joins me now from outside the courthouse in downtown Manhattan, where jurors brought a first day of school attention to their tasks. So what stuck out to you about what was happening in the courtroom? I mean, this is the first day of actual trial going on. The jurors, the judge, what struck you?
As you were just saying, the jurors really sat at rapt attention during all of this, and they were paying attention to whoever was speaking, not so much to Trump, which we've seen in other cases. They were watching the defense attorney, the prosecution, the witness on the stand. And at one point, actually, as David Pecker had just started testifying, the judge realized that none of them had writing materials, and he paused to say, does anyone want a pad and paper? And all of them immediately, or almost all of them, raised their hands. And you can just tell that they're taking this very seriously. The other thing I've been watching in the courtroom is Trump, and his demeanor is much more subdued than in other cases. During E. Jean Carroll and the civil fraud trial, he was often unruly in court, but this time he's often sitting with his eyes closed. A couple times we think we've seen him napping. When the prosecution was presenting opening statements today, he really was just sitting there, his arms crossed, his eyes were closed. When the Stormy Daniels story came up, he sort of came to attention. And when his lawyer went up, and David Pecker did, he also came to attention. He was even trying to, it looked like, make eye contact with David Pecker.
And Katrina, the lawyers for both sides tried to develop a personal rapport with the jury. Was that on display today? And did it have any particular Did they display themselves in any particular way as they try to develop this relationship with the jurors?
They're really trying to tell this story in a way that the jurors can understand, because there's a lot of legal complexities to this case. But when the prosecution was presenting the case, instead of just focusing on these business records, they were telling the story of the larger conspiracy at play here. They said that Trump, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker were part of this scheme to interfere with the 2016 presidential election that didn't just involve this catch and kill scheme where they bought stories from Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal and Dino Sajudin, the former Trump doorman, but also tried to put out negative stories about Trump's opponents. And on the defense's side, they really just tried to minimize the case and say, as you said before, that these are just 34 pieces of paper. NDAs are standard. None of this is a crime.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you. And for more, CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman joins me now. Ricky, your takeaway, you've done this from the prosecutor and from the defense attorneys in those opening statements.
I can read what they said. I was not in the courtroom to see them. So the only distinction between two really excellent opening statements in terms of what was said was who had the better delivery. And the better delivery means that as I look at you, John Dickerson, in the eye, and that I know you and I are communicating, you must do that as a lawyer, and somehow you've got to do it with 18 people, because never forget that the alternates could become jurors. Both lawyers had excellent themes. And what you want out of a theme in an opening statement is what I call a nugget. And the nugget is, just as Katrina said for the prosecutor, forget about calling this about business records, falsification of business records, which is mumbo jumbo to so much people, to so many people. It's using the big thing, that this is a conspiracy and a cover-up. They made the case so much bigger than it seemed to be.
Only one more question for you, Ricky, because we're running short on time. Something Trump's lawyer said that struck me. He said, I have a spoiler alert. There's nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. It's called democracy. Why is that not like somebody who's caught cheating saying there's nothing wrong with trying to do well on a test? It's called being a good student. Well,
obviously, we know that cheating on a test is definitely wrong. However, I have to assume that what Todd Blanche, as Trump's defense lawyer, was attempting to do was to say, we all talk, we all try to persuade, we spin. We want the American public in democracy to hear a change of ideas that are persuasive and expressive. Some jurors may have liked that, others may not have.
Ricky Kleeman, thank you. We're going to go through a lot of this case with you. We're very grateful you're here. Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks, John.
Now to the Middle East, where the head of Israel's military intelligence resigned over the security failures that led to the Hamas attack on October 7th. Meanwhile, an independent inquiry appointed by the United Nations says Israel has yet to provide evidence linking UNRWA members to Hamas and other militant groups. Israel alleged members of UNRWA were involved in the October 7th attack. More than a dozen countries, including the United States, suspended funding to the agency due to the allegations. Columbia University canceled in-person classes Monday as pro-Palestinian protests on the New York City campus entered their 6th day. More than 100 students were arrested last week after setting up an encampment on the school's lawn. Some Jewish students expressed safety concerns, and a prominent university rabbi encouraged them to stay home during the protests. New York City Mayor Eric Adams joined CBS News earlier to discuss.
The right to protest is a part of the American way of life. And I protested as a young man during the South Africa, calling for the dismantle of apartheid. So I know what it is to protest. But if you look at those protests, you will see that there was no call spewing out the destruction of any particular group. There was no calls for violence. There was no celebrating terrorist organizations like Hamas. That is what is bringing about a level of concern that you are witnessing.
The protest started the same day Columbia's president testified before a House panel about anti-Semitism on college campuses. Since then, all 10 New York House Republicans have called for her resignation. Meanwhile, on Yale's Connecticut campus, encampment protests entered their third day. The university says campus police have issued summonses to 47 students who will also face disciplinary action from the school. How far can American cities go to address homelessness? That was the question before the Supreme Court Monday. The justices heard arguments on laws that aim to punish people for sleeping in public places, even if they have nowhere else to go. A report from the Housing and Urban Development Department found more than 256,000 people lacked shelter on any given night in 2023. That's up 12% from the year prior and about 3.5 times the 77,000 who attended the last Super Bowl. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans joins me now. Carter, where did this legal fight start?
Okay, so this all started in Grants Pass, Oregon, a small town that basically wanted to enforce some public camping laws to keep people from camping in a public park. And they were taken to court. They were sued by some individuals who basically said, you're violating our 8th Amendment rights against cruel and unusual punishment. We have to sleep. We have nowhere to sleep. We have nowhere to go. You're not offering any shelter. So therefore, you are criminalizing homelessness. And that was the issue before the Supreme Court today. That is what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled, is that basically these cities can't enforce their camping laws, their public camping laws, until they have an alternative for people to go to. And we've spent billions in this nation on this problem over the last several years, and it hasn't gotten any better. It's only gotten worse. So now the Supreme Court is about to weigh in.
And how did the justices seem to land on the issue based on the arguments?
You know, based on the arguments and based on the questions they were asking today, arguments lasted about 2 hours. It looks like it's going to go right down ideological lines, and this is a conservative court. Now, we're not expecting a ruling until June, but you could kind of get an idea from the questions the justices were asking. And it's a question of, again, whether sleeping in public is an alienable right where you can sleep wherever you want, or should there be some guidelines here? Should we add some nuance to these laws? Should we let cities and governments figure this out for themselves, where people can camp and sleep in public if we cannot provide shelter or services for them? And that's what the Supreme Court's going to be deciding on. We should get a ruling in late June.
Carter Evans in Los Angeles, thank you.
Sure.
Still ahead, protecting the ocean's predators, why animals like sharks are key to the health of the seas. Plus, for the past 2 years, the United States has been quietly resettling hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees. We'll meet one of the families who escaped war and now live and work here. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
to keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The Secretary of Commerce in any administration is not often a household name, but the current occupant of that office, Gina Raimondo, is at the center of a global competition for semiconductor dominance, which puts her at the center of 2 of the hottest global national security hotspots in the world. Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes spoke with her for the broadcast.
If you think about national security today in 2024, it's not just tanks and missiles, it's technology. It's semiconductors, it's AI, it's drones. And the Commerce Department is at the red-hot center of technology.
And 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl joins me now. Leslie, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Picking up on what the Secretary said about this national security risk, how did that manifest itself with Ukraine and then with China?
Well, on the Ukraine side, the minute the Russians invaded, we put on all these restrictions, particularly for these semiconductor chips, which go into everything military today. And she's really a brilliant, I would say, negotiator, because the Commerce Department, as you said, was sort of a backwater place. The thing we knew most about Commerce, the Secretary, was that the last one used to fall asleep all the time. That's what we knew about Wilbur Ross.
Yes.
So she comes along and gets all these assignments for herself, which involve national security and technology and jobs and manufacturing. She's just blown up this center at Commerce to make it vital.
And vital with respect to foreign policy and national security, but also she's involved in the Internet for All program, which is a very domestic American program.
Huge. She wants to make sure that every American has high-speed internet connection, and she is making sure that manufacturers build what's needed to do that, to wire every home in this country. It's huge.
And also creating a market for all those semiconductors. If everybody's got internet connection, they're going to need computers with semiconductors.
John, we used to make semiconductors, the United States. We don't anymore. We farmed it out, and what she's trying to do is bring it back.
Leslie, you have a keen eye for politicians. You've covered a few of them. Now, Raimondo was governor of Rhode Island. As Commerce Secretary now, how do you read her political instincts and her possible future?
She has excellent political instincts, for sure. Everybody talks about her as a possible future presidential candidate. And when I asked her about it, she was a little coy, let's say, about it. She is mentioned constantly in that realm.
And based on what you saw her do, you think she's
up to the job? Well, she's doing a really important job at Commerce, effective, and we'll see. You know, it's hard to run for president.
Sure is, especially these days. Leslie Stahl, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This week marks 2 years since the United States launched a program to resettle refugees displaced by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The policy known as Uniting for Ukraine has allowed U.S. citizens to sponsor the arrival of more than 100,000 Ukrainian refugees with resounding efficiency and relatively little controversy. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez met one family admitted to the United States through the program.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
10-year-old Yana has a bright smile and big dreams. What do you love about the U.S.?
US is very, very, very nice. I like the flowers. People aren't like being mean to anybody. They're being nice.
They're being nice to you.
Yeah.
And you feel safe here in the U.S.
Yeah.
But roughly 2 years ago, Yana and her family were still in Ukraine. Yana's mother, Olena Kupchak, remembers the very moment when the war upended their lives. We heard powerful explosions, she says, and we could not believe it at the beginning. Our house was literally moving. It started to shake. We thought it was the end. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has displaced millions of refugees, most of them women and children, triggering the largest refugee exodus in Europe since World War II. As other European countries receive these refugees, President Biden quickly followed suit.
We've also will welcome 100,000 Ukrainians to the United States with a focus on reuniting families.
In April of 2022, his administration created Uniting for Ukraine, allowing an unlimited number of Ukrainians sponsored by Americans to come to the U.S. and work here legally.
I didn't sleep on that night when the program was launched. I was sitting at midnight waiting for the website to open.
Olena's sister, Lana Rogers, is a U.S. citizen living in New Jersey. She sponsored Olena and her family, who made it to the U.S. in June of 2022. You're happy to have your family here in the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely. I love it. Yana is like my third daughter, you know, like, so whichever my kids... She's saying, like, Yana spending all the weekends in your house, the girls having sleepovers all the time.
Olena and her husband have since found jobs and an apartment.
I'm coming down to get it!
And Yana can now just focus on being a kid. Does she like going to school here in the U.S.?
Yana is very happy at school. Just every day go, Mom, I need to come, very quickly, go, as every day.
She's very happy and she wants to go to school every day.
Yeah.
With little backlash, the U.S. has approved over 236,000 Uniting for Ukraine cases, often in just weeks, a rarity in a backlogged immigration system.
I think it shows how the U.S. can act with swiftness when it wants to.
Refugee advocate Krish Amara Vignaraja says other migrants fleeing desperate circumstances, like Haitians and Venezuelans, should receive the same welcome.
Just as racism and xenophobia have penetrated so many elements of our society, it did factor into the unique treatment that Ukrainians received.
Did you play soccer with the girls?
Ukrainians like Olena still face obstacles. Their permission to be in the U.S. expires every 2 years. The U.S. has argued that most Ukrainians will eventually go home, but there's no telling when the war will end. The Russians are constantly bombing your town.
Every day.
Every day.
Bomb.
You cannot go back to Ukraine.
No, I not come back. But I not have no house, I not have nothing.
Hi, John. Olena and her family were just given permission to stay in the U.S. for another 2 years, but they do not have a path to permanent status and American citizenship. And in addition to the tens of thousands of Ukrainians who have arrived under this Uniting for Ukraine policy, another 350,000 Ukrainians have arrived outside of that process since the start of the Russian invasion.
Tell me about the 350, where that's 350,000. What's the mechanism that allows them to come in?
Well, many of them have come here under the traditional visa process as tourist visa holders or as holders of visas for direct family members of U.S. citizens and permanent residents. Some of them are actually Ukrainians who flew to Mexico during the start of the invasion and then were processed by U.S. border officials. U.S. border officials in April of 2022 processed around 25,000 Ukrainians before this program was formally set up. So in total, it's over 500,000 Ukrainian arrivals, which is a very significant number.
Camilla, you cover this issue so well, and you know all the different gradations. Why has there not been the backlash for the Ukrainian migration that we've seen with other populations?
Well, one reason I think, John, is geopolitics. Ukrainian refugees, frankly, enjoy bipartisan support that is increasingly rare in immigration policy and politics because they are seen as victims of this anti-American regime in Moscow. And the other reason is because of the nature of this Uniting for Ukraine program. Arrivals under that policy can work here legally immediately after setting foot here on American soil. They also need a financial sponsor in the first place to come here, and early on, they were eligible for refugee resettlement benefits, including food stamps. So they did not create the same logistical, operational, and economic burdens and challenges that receiving communities face when they started housing hundreds of thousands of migrants coming across the border. And I should mention that some refugee advocates argue that race is also a factor because they believe that Ukrainians may be perceived as more compatible to U.S. communities than other migrants.
Is there any way that model can be used for other populations?
The Biden administration would argue yes, because they actually have created a very similar program for migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. But that program is capped at 30,000 arrivals per month. Uniting for Ukraine is unlimited, and that program is also being challenged in court by Republican-led states. Uniting for Ukraine is not.
Camila Montoya-Galvez, tremendous as
Thanks,
always.
John.
Thanks a lot. This photo spooked us, frankly, when it came up on our computer screens this morning. It is a photo taken 2 days after the sinking of the RMS Titanic. That, what you're looking at right there, may be the iceberg that collided with the so-called unsinkable ship, leading to the deaths of more than 1,500 people. The photo was taken aboard one of the ships sent to recover bodies from the 1912 shipwreck. The 5-by-3-inch photograph was passed down for generations before being acquired by a memorabilia collector. It is now expected to sell at auction for between $5,000 and $8,500. As for the star of the photo, it too has sunk into the deep. The average lifespan for an iceberg is only about 2 to 3 years. The nation's drug supply is running short. Coming up, why some medications are harder to find and what that means for the people who need them. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. The prosecution and defense presented their opening statements Monday in former President Trump's New York criminal trial. Prosecutors also called their first witness, David Pecker, under allegations he helped Trump in 2016 by burying negative stories about him. Protests are escalating at major college campuses over the Israel-Hamas war. Columbia University in New York switched to all remote classes on Monday, first day of Passover. Pro-Palestinian protesters have been on campus for nearly a week, with more than 100 people arrested. The Supreme Court heard arguments Monday that could affect many Americans facing homelessness. The case revolves around an Oregon city's law banning camping on public property. The policy has prompted concerns about criminalizing sleep when people have nowhere else to go. 2024 kicked off with the highest number of drug shortages on record. The American Society of Health System Pharmacists says there were 323 active medication shortages in the first 3 months of the year. Back in February, a doctor with one of the largest cancer care facilities in the country told Congress what this means for his profession.
In a country that offers the most advanced cutting-edge cancer therapies, we were put in a situation that a decade of medical training did not prepare us for. The moral dilemma of how to ration our limited supply of these chemotherapies.
CBS News reporter Erica Brown has been on the phones reporting out this story, and she joins me now to tell us what she found. Erica, good to be with you. Thank you for doing this work. Why? Well, let's start with which drugs are in short supply first.
Yeah, and John, as you mentioned, it's a record number of drugs currently under shortage right now. So what drugs are we talking about? We're looking at 5 classes of medications. That includes central nervous system stimulants. Now, those could be used for pain management or neurological disorders, especially those like ADHD. We're looking at injectable chemotherapy. That could be used for cancer patients and their treatments. We're looking at hormone therapy and also antimicrobials. Antimicrobials are sometimes used to treat life-threatening infections. They include antibiotics and antivirals and also electrolytes and fluids. So you go to the doctor, you go for a medical procedure, you need an IV, you need those fluids. So a wide range of drugs currently under shortage. And speaking to medical health professionals today, they tell me among those classes, what they're seeing is that those medications used to treat ADHD are among the most widely impacted when we look at the number of patients affected by this. John, that can be extremely disruptive to people who need these medications and their ability to function and work, home, school. So those medications, I think, have the highest number of patients currently that are directly impacted. But overall, we're looking at a wide range of drugs under shortage.
That is broad. So why is this happening?
It's a complex system. It's like a perfect storm of high demand, supply chain disruption, and also a very complex drug marketplace. So we're looking at high demand. For example, you know those diabetes and weight loss drugs that are very popular right now. Surge in demand sometimes can mean a shortage in supply. Looking at supply chain disruptions, that could be geopolitical factors, it could be environmental factors, especially for drugs that are manufactured overseas and some of the sourcing and raw materials that come from overseas. That can be very easily disrupted. And then look at the marketplace. So you have generic drugs, John, that are priced so low, manufacturers are not incentivized to invest because the profit margins are low. So sometimes you have manufacturers that leave altogether, and you're left with fewer manufacturers that are left to handle a high supply, high demand.
So if there's only one manufacturer and it gets wobbly because of some other thing, now you're out.
Right.
What's being done about all this?
Well, you have the Biden administration, the Department of Health and Human Services. Just this month, they laid out policy recommendations to help incentivize manufacturers to get back in the game and to invest in some of the supply chain management and also in production stateside and sourcing raw materials stateside. They also look to incentivize hospitals to bolster their own supplies. And they're also looking at diversifying manufacturing so it comes from multiple sources and market transparency.
Erica Brown, that's a lot today.
That's a lot.
And you were working those phones. Thank you so much, Erica.
You're welcome.
When House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul spoke Saturday about legislation that could ban TikTok, he called the app a spy balloon in American phones. Much of the House agreed. A bill passed by a vote of 360 to 58. TikTok says, in part, the effort would, quote, trample the free speech rights of 170 million Americans and devastate 7 million businesses. Senate Intelligence Chairman Mark Warner addressed such fears Sunday on Face the Nation.
There's plenty of creativity on TikTok. There are people that make their living off of TikTok as social influencers. I don't want that to go away. I simply want to make sure that the individuals pulling the strings are not ultimately functionaries of the Communist Party of China.
U.S. officials like Warner feared Chinese law could require TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to share American user data with the Chinese government. To prevent that, they want ByteDance to sell TikTok within a year. If it doesn't, app stores and web providers would be compelled to pull the app. The Senate could vote on the measure Tuesday. President Biden says he will sign it. TikTok would likely fight the legislation in court. In honor of Earth Day, President Biden unveiled $7 billion in grants for presidential solar projects. He says that's enough to power nearly 1 million low-income households.
Millions of families will save over $400 a year in utility bills, and that's $350 million nationwide. It means we'll cut more than 5 million metric tons of carbon pollution annually. And folks, Solar for All will give us more breathing room and cleaner breathing room.
This funding is part of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, and it is expected to create some 200,000 jobs. Sharks. The word alone invites shivers in many. A fin splitting the water while you're swimming is of concern. But despite how terrifying they might seem, these creatures are critical to the survival of the world's oceans. Our Ben Tracy spoke with a group of their protectors.
Here in the Bahamas, reef sharks are one of the most common sharks that we see.
Candace Fields took us to Danger Reef in the Bahamas to see this. Waters teeming with reef sharks. As top predators, they're critical to keeping the balance of fish populations in check so coral reef ecosystems can thrive.
They're kind of the kings of the coral reef, right? They're keeping the reef in a nice harmonious balance.
Fields is part of a global shark census called FinPrint. In 2018, it found the 5 main species of reef sharks had declined 63% and were functionally extinct on 20% of the reefs, largely due to overfishing. But they're thriving here inside what is called a Marine Protected Area, or MPA.
You can't come in here and fish for anything. You can't take a thing.
Absolutely. It's complete protection. All right, let's check the camera.
We watched as Fields deployed an underwater camera to help count the sharks. Her data is part of a new study to see if MPAs help threatened marine life recover. There are more than 18,000 MPAs covering about 8% of the world's oceans, part of a United Nations effort to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030.
So we're on our way to look for people fishing.
Yes, sir.
But enforcement is key. We rode along with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force on patrol.
Stop the vessel.
It has seized dozens of boats.
We had 46 persons on board.
Fining and jailing fishermen and confiscating their often massive illegal catch.
Either we chase them away or we catch them, and we've been having huge success doing this.
So when it comes to enforcement, you guys are the muscle.
Yes.
These vessels have entered into the Bahamian waters.
Part of the brains of the operation is Skylight, a system that helps track the bad guys using a mix of AI and satellite vessel tracking data.
So we're using this technology to help focus those patrol efforts.
It's something that I think will have a big impact on shark conservation in the future.
Hopefully helping the kings of the reef rebound.
And Ben Tracy joins me now in the studio for this. Ben, why are the oceans so important to our Earth?
I mean, it seems like a basic question,
yes,
right? I mean, we think of like the rainforest being the lungs of the planet, but really scientists say it is the oceans. The oceans are the lungs of the Earth. And they're really what keeps us alive. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, oceans generate 50% of the oxygen on the planet. That means they're responsible for every other breath that we take. Now, you might remember learning about photosynthesis in school. It works the same way in the ocean. Little plants called plankton absorb some of the carbon dioxide released by marine animals living in the ocean and from the atmosphere. The plants then release oxygen back out, and that's literally every other breath you're taking.
I fell in love with that lungs of the earth way of putting it. So help me understand how the oceans help mitigate with climate change.
Yeah, I mean, they are our greatest ally when it comes to the fight against climate change. And the reason for that is that the oceans have absorbed more than 30% of the carbon dioxide that humans have created by burning fossil fuels since the start of the industrial age. And that's according to NOAA as well. In fact, oceans hold 60 times more CO2 than the atmosphere does. More than 90% of the excess heat created by global warming in the past 50 years has been absorbed by the oceans. So basically, without oceans playing that role, UN researchers say that the Earth would have warmed 97 degrees between 1955 and 2010. And I think you know what that means. You and I would not be sitting here.
No, yes. So now that we've gotten everybody to be tender and loving towards their oceans, what's being done to make sure this condition either stays the same or gets better?
Yeah, so this whole idea of marine protected areas is a pretty effective way, they think, to protect parts of the ocean. But, you know, what can all of us do? I mean, most of us aren't on the ocean to any great degree in any part of our day. But there are things you can do. I mean, buying non-toxic chemicals and cleaning supplies, because almost everything we put down the drain ends up in the ocean at some point. Mm-hmm. Buy less plastic, because our plastic is, you know, rapidly polluting the ocean. And then, also make sure when you go shopping at the grocery store, you buy sustainable seafood. And if they don't have the little sign there at the counter, ask the guy behind the counter and ask him which one is the most sustainable of the options.
Taking efforts not to pollute the lungs.
I love it.
No, I know. I don't want to hurt the lungs. Ben Tracy, thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Still to come, a growing form of fraud is posing physical, emotional, and financial threats to everyday Americans. CBS's Jim Axelrod will break down our original reporting on the dangers of romance scams. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are
about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
CBS News is investigating the growing damage from romance scams in the United States. They're largely carried out through dating apps, and Jim Axelrod tells us how one of those cases turned tragic when a widow was swindled out of her life savings.
Kelly Gow is a daughter searching for answers.
I have an appointment with Detective Jeff Phillips.
About what happened to her mother. Laura Kowal, a 57-year-old retired healthcare executive who was widowed in 2015 and moved from Chicago to the small town of Galena, Illinois, to start her next chapter.
Oh, I love you, honey. She had all these buckets full in her life, but there was this one bucket that was missing of having a relationship.
So Laura, like 3 in 10 adults have done, turned to online dating, creating a profile on Match.com.
It felt safer to do it that way than to go to a bar and meet somebody.
Online dating felt safer.
Mm-hmm.
She matched with someone who called himself Frank Borg, and who used these 2 pictures stolen from a Chilean doctor. Frank claimed to be a Swedish businessman.
Clearly, my mom felt the emotions of feeling loved. And I know there's a lot of people out there saying, well, how could that happen?
64,000 Americans were taken for more than $1 billion by romance scammers last year, more than double the $500 million it was just 4 years before.
I'm calling in regards to your mother.
When Kelly got a call from a federal investigator
who may have been involved in a fraud scam.
Kelly?
Yeah.
Deputy Tavarthan with the Sheriff's Office. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
She raced to her mom's home, only to find it empty.
You must have been freaking out.
I was.
A search for a missing woman. Laura Cowell was last seen on Friday.
Turning the house upside down, Kelly found emails detailing a fraudulent investment scheme involving a fake company called Goose Investments. CBS News reviewed hundreds of emails from the scammer, laying out an elaborate scheme. Over the course of nearly 2 years, Frank convinced Laura to send him $1.5 million. But Goose Investments wasn't real. Frank wasn't real. And buried in a file cabinet was this note from Kelly's mom. I've been living a double life. Yes, it involves Frank. I tried to stop this, but I knew I would end up dead. Laura's body was found in the Mississippi River, more than 200 miles away, somewhere Kelly says she'd never been. The medical examiner called it death by drowning, never ruling homicide or suicide.
I had a lot of questions for the sheriff's department down in Missouri that was responsible for the recovery of her body.
Dissatisfied with the response from law enforcement, Kelly began investigating herself, tracing the possible routes where her mother's car was seen on surveillance tape.
This service station here
Yep.
captured your mom's vehicle.
Yep.
Getting answers is now Kelly's life's work.
It wasn't until I learned that I was going to be a mom myself and have a daughter that I knew that one day she would know the full story of how her grandmother passed away. And ultimately, her grandmother's story can save someone's life.
Whew. Jim Axelrod joins us here in the studio. Jim, that's a heartbreaker of a story. How common are cases like this?
Yeah, it's so insidious, right? And this is the most disturbing part of the whole thing. If we go back 4 or 5 years ago, maybe $500 million in scams were reported. In the last few years, that number has more than doubled to more than $1 billion is lost. There's about 64,000 Americans at last report. But John, that's only those people who report it. There's such shame, such embarrassment that is thought of by law enforcement as a significant undercount.
That there are so many people out there cannibalizing on others' human emotions is revolting. What kind of tactics do they use?
Yeah, there's a special place in hell for these people. There's no question. You know, the online dating platforms, the apps, have made that sort of a target-rich environment because you can have these conversations. But then in the age of being able to find out so much about people, the scammers can strike up a conversation and already know things about the victim, the target, which then fosters that sense of connection and intimacy. They're finishing, each other's sentences because he already knows who he's dealing with or she already knows who she's dealing with, scammer to victim.
And in this epidemic, this age of loneliness, you can imagine technology plus loneliness a lot. Oof. Jim Axelrod, thank you, Jim. Jim will have much more this week on the series Anything for Love Inside the Romance Scam Epidemic. Be sure to tune in to the Daily Report Tuesday and Wednesday. Still to come, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2024 is revealed. We'll show you who's being honored for their contribution to music and who didn't make the cut this year. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
In the generation before the Russians imprisoned reporter Evan Gershkovich for more than a year, the imprisoned journalist who captured the country's attention was named Terry Anderson. The Associated Press reporter, who was held captive in Lebanon for nearly 7 years, has died. He spent several years covering the country's civil war. He became one of America's longest-held hostages after being kidnapped by Islamic militants in 1985. He believed he was targeted because he was one of the few Westerners living in Lebanon at the time. Anderson was released in 1991. His daughter says he died of complications from a recent heart surgery at his New York home. He was 76 years old. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has its class of 2024 inductees. Honorees include Mary J. Blige, Cher, the Dave Matthews Band, A Tribe Called Quest, and Ozzy Osbourne, who was previously inducted as part of the band Black Sabbath, if you're making note of this at home. Musicians who were nominated but who didn't make the list include Mariah Carey, Lenny Kravitz, and the late Sinead O'Connor. The induction ceremony will be held October 19th. The logic behind Noah's Ark was take 2 of every animal to preserve their species after disaster. A Dutch zoo is now taking a similar approach for coral. It's part of a global effort to create a reserve population of the threatened species, which is habitat to so much nutritious ocean food. The species faces deadly climate change and other risks. The zoo says the coral could be reintroduced to the ocean when conditions improve. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. The jury in Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York heard opening statements and their first witness. We'll have more from the courtroom. Plus, 2 years ago, the United States began resettling Ukrainians displaced by Russia's invasion. We check in on how one family is living and working in New Jersey. And sharks are known predators of the seas, but protecting them is key to protecting the oceans. We'll explain in our Climate Watch report. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?